Lure, June 16th, 1888.
I'm starting a new journal because, well, I'm starting a new life, so we may as well go over the basics. My name is Thomas A. Napier. I am 32 years of age. If I could describe my life thus far, it would be that of a boulder perched on the edge of a cliff, all the potential in the world, but needing a sufficient push to take advantage of the situation. I had extremely high marks in grade school, and as soon as my domineering father heard the words exceptionally gifted, he pressured me into dental school at 21. I did well for a semester or two, but drinks, women, and poker were seductive to my young heart in a way that I simply could not shake off. My grades started to slip as well as my interest, and soon I found myself hopping a train to the west. For the next 10 years, I gambled and drank my way through California, and I had suddenly become a decent poker player, but by the time I made it to through Tennessee, I suddenly wasn't. Stealing and cheating was never a life plan for myself, but when one has vices, the unthinkable becomes quite thinkable. When you live that way, one tends to make enemies, and I was making enemies faster than I was making enough to pay them, so I went on the run. Nowhere I ran seemed far enough, so I decided to figure out if my pursuers could follow me off the edge of the world. Luke Napier was never aspirational throughout grade school and never even bothered with higher learning, but he was slow and steady, slowly climbing up the mountain. While I flew with Icarus and fell from great heights, he diligently built his life. He is now the legendary Captain Napier. He captains the mighty SS Griffin, the greatest whaler ship to ever touch the ocean, and if you show up at any seaside tavern late at night, you will most likely hear a tale or two about the mighty Captain Napier and his roughneck crew of adventurers. The captain and crew of the Griffin's fame grew so because of my brother's insanity. They were known to go far beyond the known whaling grounds to places that didn't even truly exist on the map. They would go to hell itself if there were sperm whales there. I had no interest in adventure or the sea, but I had quite a strong interest in staying alive, and the likelihood of that shrunk smaller by the day on land. So I swallowed my pride and wrote a letter to my brother, Captain Luke, and asked if he could use another set of hands. He offered me a role as a deckhand on the condition that I didn't drink. I agreed. What Luke doesn't know won't hurt him. June 22nd, 1888, 2 hopped trains and an unpaid angry carriage driver. Later, I have arrived at Crystal Port at the southernmost part of Florida. It was not hard to find the Griffin. It is a fine ship and appears to be much newer than these humble bread boxes floating around it. Up on the deck, I saw Luke, my little brother in his stately uniform, chest puffed up like a penguin, organizing his ragtag lot of ruffians. I made my way up onto the deck, and Luke introduced me to the men. I am not sure who I was expecting the crew to be, but I was not impressed. As soon as they heard my name was Thomas, they started chanting, "Tom Thumb, Tom Thumb." I told them Thomas was preferred, but apparently that wouldn't do. So now, against my wishes, I am Tom Thumb. My big qualification for this title is being named Thomas, I suppose. I may be the only person on this ship that can read. Luke shook my hand and welcomed me. Luke then gave this fantastical speech about bravery and going where the wind takes us and all this inspirational guff. I had arrived late in the evening, so after the brilliant speech by our fearsome captain, everyone was sent to their quarters because it was getting dark and were to set sail at dawn. I found my cabin, and because of my arduous journey and the rum I had on the way there, I went to sleep near immediately. June 23rd, 1888. It was our first day on the open sea. They have me pulling ropes that I'm not quite clear on what they are connected to yet, but I will soon. The work is mindless, but it stills my mind in a way I haven't gotten to experience before. The views are breathtaking, and the sounds of the ocean are quite calming and peaceful, but before I forget, I need to write down my profiles and thoughts of these half-wits my brother has found it necessary to hire. There were 7 men to be included on this voyage, including myself. There was the great Captain Napier, my brother. Then, First Mate Gilliam Gill Leeds. He seemed quite strange and nervous at all times. He walked with a limp and talked to the men in a chaotic, bumbling way. His sentences made sense, but they crashed into each other like waves and made everyone else nervous to listen to. His eyes darted back and forth as he spoke and seemed to have a stutter. He looked as though he dressed in the dark, in quite a hurry. All that said, he seemed to be fairly intelligent and kind. Cook Jack, Gator, Croc. Gator was a fat Cajun man. He seemed quite laid back. His clothes had some type of soup all over them. He seemed as though he was someone that would be good company at the tavern, that could chew the fat as good as any man, and judging by the smell of his clothes, he could actually cook. He didn't seem too bright, but I had no problem with him. He concerns himself with a whole lot of nothing, normal everyday things that I would do without thinking, like making my bed or shaving are planned serious parts of his whole day. Jim Bones. Smith Bones. I didn't like. He was the epitome of what you would expect of a basic crewman of a ship. His wit was tenuous, at best. His body odor could kill a horse. His teeth were rotten because he was always shoving some sort of sweet into his mouth and talking through it, so his breath smelled like death in a candy store. Also, he was definitely not following the captain's no imbibing rule, and he spoke in this stupid pirate cadence that I didn't buy for a second. As far as I was concerned, he was the face of illiteracy. He could lose his entire train of thought very easily. If he saw anything shiny, bright, loud, or pretty, his mind simply jumped the rails like a moth to flame. I will avoid this man. Michael Knives Sharp. Knives was the ship's self-anointed tough guy. He had a scar across his face that seemed like it could have been much smaller of a scar had it been tended to properly. He spoke in a snarl and would involve anyone in earshot in these overblown fish tales where he kills hammerheads with a boot knife, or was lost at sea for 20 days only drinking rainwater. He eats nails and drinks lightning, or whatever the saying is. He looks like a circus performer. His tattoos have tattoos, and he wears an eye patch, and smokes like chimney while trying to convince you he has courted every woman on God's green earth. He constantly tries to coax the other men into fights, and purposely tortures the fish he catches for us to eat before he kills them. I hate this man. It's one thing to be stupid, it's another thing entirely to advertise it so vigorously. I understand. You are the toughest man in the whole world, and learning is for women. Got it. Timothy Finch Mitchell. Finch at a glance was less loathsome than a good portion of the men, but I disliked him most of all. He is always smiling, always. To be that optimistic in this world, a man would have to know absolutely nothing. It grates at my nerves to no end. He's always making terrible jokes, laughing and singing. Good Lord, this man knows every sea shanty ever created. I'm pretty sure he's making up some of them, because I think they are supposed to rhyme. Any second of peace I have with the ocean, this buffoon starts singing or telling me a joke that makes no sense, and then doubles over on the floor laughing. The man is a clown. Everyone has a stupid nickname instead of a wife. This crew is a joke. I find most of their company unpleasant, and some of them I find completely offensive, but I enjoy the sea, I enjoy the work, somehow, and also I see this ship as a functioning body. I must be the brain. Maybe in my desire to escape the real world, I have found a place where my mind is truly needed, and I can put myself to good use here, save up some good wages, and have some semblance of a decent life yet. July 24th, 1888. I hate this ship, and I wish I were dead. I know I have not been diligent in my journaling, but if you want to know what the last 30-odd days have been like, just copy the last journal entry 30 times. It's maddening, and everything that vexed me about these men initially has become multiplied infinitely. Wake up too early, try to get breakfast from Gator, while he tells me some sort of endless story about his time as a street performer in New Orleans. Pull a rope. Hear 500 sea shanties at the Finch concert. Mop the deck. Knives tells me about how he killed a shark while kissing a woman, or some other ridiculous lie. I don't think he's ever seen a woman. Eat fish. Smell bones. Get nervous trying to avoid eye contact as Jill attempts to give me orders. Get bossed around by my little brother. Slump into bed. Sneak some rum. Pass out. My brother Luke takes a break from bossing me around every so often to go out in the dinghy with me to inspect the hull. That isn't so bad. It's the one time Luke can just be my brother again. When Luke isn't trying so hard to be the captain, he's not so bad. There in the dinghy, I feel like we can actually have a real conversation. We went out today. We talked about the voyage, and he asked me how I was taking to the sea. I really hate it here, truly, but I was happy he cared, and I didn't want to seem ungrateful, so I said said I was happy to be here. Lie, but maybe things will get better. He also said if I mind my PS and QS, he would possibly make me second mate. I do not aspire to do this for a living long term, but if it gives me enough power to tell these idiots to shut up or get out of my way, I'll take it. Luke in the Dingy isn't so bad. It's Luke in the ship I don't like. July 25th, 1888. I had the strangest dream last night. I suddenly appeared within a misty morning, the dew on the grass sparked like hand-cut diamonds, and the fog was a thick pillow you could cut with a knife. Found myself at the peak of a giant hill. The hill went in a near-perfect circle around a massive lake. The hill steeply declined toward the lake, and one could view the lake below the fog quite well, but it seemed very cumbersome to wander down to it. I sat atop my hill and concerned myself with a beautiful butterfly that decided to perch on my leg. Suddenly I heard splashing. It was quite loud enough to scare off my new friend. I looked down, annoyed, to see two little boys splashing around, causing a ruckus. They were both in swim attire, and splashing and cackling like hens. Since my butterfly had moved on to greener pastures, I watched the children throwing muck at each other and acting like fools. I was actually finding them quite funny to watch. One young boy was about waist deep facing his friend, standing on the beach, and had just pulled up a gob of mud about to hurl it when I saw a dark shadow behind him rising from the depths. My heart stopped. I stood to my feet and yelled to warn them, but they couldn't hear me. I started running down the steep incline, beginning them to leave the water. The terrible shadow burst through the water. A black tentacle burst forth from the depths and grabbed the child, lifted him high into the air. Both children and I screamed in terror. I ran even faster, not worried about my own safety anymore. I was almost there. Then suddenly the tentacle tightened. The child's skeleton was snapped in half. The child went limp. Then from the depths, a giant beaked mouth surfaced, and the tentacle shoved the child into its mouth and ripped him to pieces. I screamed in terror, then as soon as it appeared, it was gone. I ran to the terrified boy crying on the beach and picked him up. When I looked at his face, I froze. It was Luke, my only sibling, my captain, as a child. It didn't look like him. It was him. After staring for a moment in shock, I found my voice again and asked, "Who was that boy that was taken?" Luke said, "That was my brother." I was awoken by Gator trying to carry too many pots to the galley. What a strange dream. I don't believe dreams have mystical meanings, but that one has stayed on my mind. July 26th, 1888. I don't like the land or the sea. I feel like I belong on neither. I've begun to see why people refer to the sea as a lady. You never quite get on her good side. It was quite exciting being aboard a big vessel for the first time, but that only lasts a few days. After a month, everything looks the same, and you realize you are just trapped in a big room surrounded only by fools, and nothing, and the horrible creatures below. I spend a lot of time just looking off into the water. When I look off the deck, I see their eyes sometimes looking up at me. I don't like looking into the eyes of sea creatures. It's empty in there. It's like when God was creating the beasts of the earth, he simply ran out of souls before he got to the ocean. It's strange watching the crew worship my Luke. Well, to me he's Luke. To them he's the fearless Captain Napier, the greatest whaling captain on the 7 seas. He is a good man, but I see him in quite a different light than his men. I hate to have to keep crawling back and asking for his help. I was always smarter, but he was always better. I love him, but I hate him for that. While everyone was getting ready for bed, Luke called me out on the deck. He was just looking out at the water, holding a lantern. I looked out over the ink-black water to see hundreds of these hideous creatures that looked like they were from hell itself. Some looked like sea monsters, some all bloated, some were just teeth and eyes, some glowing, some looking as if they were imploding, and more were coming from the depths, all floating on top of each other, writhing in a grotesque display. I was terrified. I started to scream, but Luke covered my mouth. "What are those horrible things?" I cried. Luke said, "Those are deep sea fish, but I've only ever seen a couple in my life. I have never seen a great deal of those. They aren't supposed to be here. They are supposed to be miles beneath us. Something down there is bad wrong. It is literally killing them to be here. We need to press onward quickly." "I'll go get the crew," I said. "No, they would be very afraid if they saw this. "Help me hoist the sail. We will just leave the sail up tonight, and I'll steer the ship for a few hours and get us somewhere better. There are some books in my office about the deep sea. Go grab them on your way to bed and tell me what you find out," Luke said. So I helped him hoist the sail. I grabbed the books and drank in my room and frantically read until my brain hurt, then I passed out. July 27th, 1888. Something strange happened last night, before I would have taken anything to break the monotony, but this was concerning. I awoke around 2 a.m. to a horrible noise. It sounded like a woman screaming that slid into a metal scraping, like both those sounds combined in some horrible way. It's like a woman being murdered while dragging a gaff hook down the side of the hull. The sound itself was unnerving, but what I found even more unsettling was, it was accompanied by this horrible headache, and the headache stayed through the night and the next day. When I went into the galley for breakfast, I saw others who looked to be in pain. Of course, Knives said he didn't have a headache, but I saw him behind the mast clutching his head when he thought no one was looking later in the day. I hope that mast falls right on his lying macho head. July 28th, 1866. We are now getting into what seamen call the Furious 50s. It's where no one with and sense goes in the ocean. It's getting colder and darker, making our already miserable time even more miserable. And what's worse, the sound appeared again last night. Louder than before, the headache more painful than before, my stomach tied in knots, and my legs turned to jelly. As soon as I hear it, I painfully wobbled up to the galley to look at the clock, 2:16 a.m. It took a few minutes to get there, so it's around 2:13 when the noise happened. July 29th, 1888. The next morning, I noticed the eyes of every sailor was bloodshot, including my own. When we made it to the galley for breakfast, dullards in the crew are all giving their theories. I hate them. Not one of them has the sense God gave a conch. They want so badly for the sound to be equipment on the ship, or a seagull suffering. When has anyone seen a seagull this far from land? Of course they'll all run to Father Captain. Captain Napier says it sounds like a whale that followed them once in the Pacific. What a load of garbage. Of course, the crew bought it hook, line, and sinker. If the sound is a seagull, why do the veins in our eyes pop jet out like spider webs when we hear it? Why do our heads pulse like a drum? Why do our stomachs turn and our legs turn to jelly? I followed the fantastic captain to his quarters and demanded he tell me what in the world is going on. I told him. He knew good and well, no whale makes a horrible sickening noise like that. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, "I know, Thomas, but when one is a captain, it is much safer to give a comforting lie than tell a crew of scared men that your captain doesn't have the answer." I told him that made sense, but I'm not a stupid sailor, and I'm also his brother, and he needs to shoot straight with me. He smiled and said, "Of course, but why don't you use that big brain of yours and help us by figuring it out what it is yourself? We could finally get some use out of you because you are a terrible sailor." We both laughed, but I didn't appreciate him demeaning me. I walked out of Luke's cabin to see Bones hiding on the nose of the ship, drinking something he seemed to be quite serious about hiding. Idiot. July 30th, 1888. The noise was back again, right at the same time again. The effect were amplified even more, and it was accompanied by what I would describe as a visual buzzing. It was hard to focus your eyes on anything. What was this sound? How was it affecting us so? This must stop. I went to the galley for breakfast. The crew looked undead, and as fed up as I was. The crew was angry. Their talk of seagull noises had morphed into talk of the Leviathan and the vengeance of Neptune himself. These people are not rational whatsoever. They all ran to their perfect little captain, and he was going to have to say or do something immediately, or there was going to be a battle with sea spirits right there in the galley. The captain stood up and said, "The sound has affected all of us, including me. The harshness of it and the pain it seems to be causing is not welcome. I'm sure the issue will come to light and be easily explained, but to expedite solving the issue, I will have a man in the crow's nest all night every night until we have an answer." Bones agreed to the task, and I was not concerned with his well-being whatsoever, so I was fine with him being the scientific test mouse. We all crawled through the day, barely alive, and crashed into bed at 9 p.m. I was awoken to screaming around 4:13 a.m. I ran into the deck, and a crowd surrounded Bones as he lay broken on the deck. He was extremely upset, and his ears were bleeding. His eyes were a strange gray color, and his legs were broken horribly. He said that he saw something. He said he was in the crow's nest and saw two large lights just ahead of the boat beneath the water. We were nowhere near land, so he pulled out his telescope. It was far too dark for him to make out anything but the two orbs. But he looked closely at the orbs and saw a small dot in the center of both. They were eyes. To see them at that distance, he said they must have been extremely large. They were binocular. Of course he didn't know that word, but he said they looked forward like a human. Then the eyes snapped in his direction, and as soon as they did, Bones said his vision went white. He saw a beautiful light before him. He said along with the light came the best feeling he had ever felt. It was warm, and he tasted something that he compared to sugar. He moved closer to the light, and the feeling intensified the closer he got. He felt weightless briefly. Bones. Then the weight returned at force. The sugar taste was replaced with pennies, and he saw the deck extremely closely. We all looked out into the water and saw nothing. I remembered watching him sneaking that bottle earlier, but didn't eat to add to the scene. Luke had Bones taken to the medical bay, and after he was gone, told everyone that he probably just fell asleep and fell out of the crow's nest. That seemed to comfort them. I'm jealous of the way the men look at Luke and listen to him. They treat him like a god and me like a cancer. I'm the better man. I never should have come on this horrible ship. I'm gonna have to figure this out myself. July 31st, 1888. I've been pondering all day. I'm the only person who has a clue out here, and if I don't figure this out, we could be in real danger. I'm weighing the options. I don't think the sound came from a seagull 400 miles from land, a whale, the Leviathan, or Neptune himself, but Bones' encounter seems a little strange and frightening even with his drinking problem. There has to be some explanation I'm not considering, some stone left unturned. I walked by the makeshift sick berth today and saw Bones. He seemed significantly weaker today than he did last night, and his eyes looked more milky, and he looked very pale. Also, there were these very visible veins jutting up his neck. Finch was attempting to play cards with Bones, but I don't think Bones could see the cards, or really knew what was going on. I pressed on and continued my chores, but I started thinking deeply about Bones. I needed to figure out exactly what is going on. Someone needs to do something. For me, this situation has become a battle of wits, and I am the only armed man in this navy of the naive. Luke does nothing to help, he just lies to the men to keep them pressing forward. I guess all the lives of the men are my charge. As they carry Luke around on their shoulders, he is marching them straight to the grave. What a coward. I have volunteered to keep watch tonight. I must see for myself if there is in fact anything to see. It was not laborious job to acquire the watch shift this evening. I'm the only man not petrified out of my wits. No, I am not petrified, but my senses are sharper than usual. I am the best of these men, and that is nothing to brag about. My shift starts soon. I must rest, then I will fill you in on the findings of my shift. I pray God watches over me. I will also secretly leave my post and check all of the mechanical parts of the ship to see if they are capable of that noise. August 1st, 1888. Nothing. I saw nothing. I stayed up through the rain, through the doldrums, through the horrific freezing night, the pitch black. I saw nothing. The sky reflected off the water, making an endless black void, and it stayed dark way too long and kept me in that stupid crow's nest even longer. I did hear the sound again. Same time, but faintly. It has gotten louder and more shrill every night but last night. The sound last night was barely audible. My head actually didn't even throb in the slightest. I bet it goes away. I wouldn't be surprised if our great captain was dragging the boat through some kelp or something, and it's scratching the boat and making the sound. Also, Luke came out on deck today and said that they think that Bones had yellow fever and that no one was allowed to go visit him or see him under any circumstances. That's fine by me. It's starting to look like all this stuff is simple and explainable. I let Knives take the watch this evening. He said if he sees the creature, he will jump in the ocean and kill it himself. I don't think there is anything to see, but just for tonight, I hope it is a Leviathan, and it drags that oaf to Davy Jones' locker. I'm getting some well-deserved shut-eye tonight. I'm finished with this drama. Who knows, Mabe Knives? The strong circus boy can kill it and solve all our problems. Good riddance and good night. August 2nd, 1888. He's gone. Knives is simply gone. He took my watch last night, and now the bugger is just gone. His clothes and boots were found wadded up at the starboard side of the ship, and there was also these strange scratches across the deck. I noticed some of the barrels we had on deck were gone, so the scratches are probably some cargo that wasn't tied down, rolling all over the deck and falling into the sea. The scratches were in rows of 6 and all over the deck. The crew is flying into their ridiculous superstitious tangents again. Sea ghosts, the Kraken, the Leviathan. My lord, they are insufferable. I hate them all. They treat a man falling overboard as the rapture itself. I saw Finch look sad today for the first time, so that is rewarding at least. Luke gave some huge sweeping poetic speech in a makeshift bodiless funereal. Finch had to sing at the funeral, of course, and Jill stuttered his way through a eulogy. That was rough. Then there goes Luke, again, making everything so dramatic and all about himself. They threw a wooden box into the ocean that we could have used for firewood. Knives was an idiot, and I'm glad he's gone. These happenings are like the dripping over my hammock when it rains. Not enough to rouse me, but too much to sleep. As I was walking to my cabin after the funeral, I heard yelling in the captain's cabin. It was Jill. I had never heard him angry before, so it was far too tempting not to eavesdrop. It didn't sound like Gil besides the stutter. He was yelling, "We must protect these men. I cannot and will not stand by and leave these questions unanswered. I will take the watch tonight." The captain agreed and told him that they would work together to figure out what was happening and that he could take the watch. I was angry that these types of important things were being discussed without me, but Gil became a man in my book that night. He was now my favorite person on the ship, and I thought maybe he and I could work together on this great mystery besieging us. I felt better as I lay in my bed that night and hoped Jill could actually retrieve some good information. August 3rd, 1888. The sound tonight surged through me. It was 10 times worse and more terrifying than ever before. My first thought was Jill, but my body locked up to a point I couldn't move, and the intensity of the sound was so bone-breakingly harsh that it caused me to black out. My last thought was of Gil's immediate demise. I woke up to Finch singing and the smell of bacon. I ran out to the galley to see everything was fine. Gil was there, in one piece, smiling and choking down a giant piece of bacon. I ran over to him and asked him what happened. He explained he saw nothing, he heard nothing. I explained the horrible sound and the effects it had on me, and he said it must have been a dream. I was happy to accept that and walked over to Gator. He gave me some sort of French greeting I didn't understand, and A sat down with Luke and Finch and ate happily till I realized when Gil spoke to me, he didn't stutter. I kept my eye on him the rest of the day as I did my chores and followed him to the captain's quarters that night. He had lied to everyone. He told the captain the weather got extremely bad and lightning began to strike around 1:50 and he was preparing to leave the crow's nest lest he be electrocuted. He said he was gathering his effects about 2 a.m. when he saw the two orbs Bones had mentioned. They seemed to lock onto his visage and started moving towards the ship, moving closer and closer till they were right below the front of the ship. He looked down into the water from the crow's nest and saw the orbs rising from the depths. He said the eyes started rising from the depths, but then the lightning flashed, and for but a moment, Gil saw a silhouette in the depths that didn't look like anything God created. It was the shape of something grotesque and malformed. He sighted the head had a giant mouth that stretched across the head. The glowing eyes took up the rest. He said it seemed to have arms, not fins, and what looked like hands, but with fingers a quarter the length of the body and a serpentine tail that curled around into a giant fin. The lightning flashed once again. Gil awoke in his bed, and when he got up, he noticed his limp was gone. Then, when he said good morning to Gator, he noticed his stutter was gone. That sounds ridiculous to me, but Gil has always been a stand-up guy, so I'll have to put some thought into some natural phenomena that could look that way to poor Jill. I'm going to need to borrow more of Luke's books. August 6th, 1888. The past 3 days have been nothing but misery and madness. A horrible storm overtook us the night Gil was healed by the thing, and when the sun went down the day of their meeting, it never returned. Storms generally bring along darkness, but not like this. It has been night for 3 days. The sun is not overshadowed, it is gone. The nightly watches were postponed from the fear of lightning or being thrown into the sea by a rouge wave. The noise has doubled in intensity and in number. It now happens at 2:13 a.m. and 2:13 p.m. The effect is now even stranger. I was in my quarters when I heard it in the first time in the day. When it pierced my eardrums, I collapsed, and my body shook violently without my permission. Then everything went black. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Whatever grabbed me had let go. I was in my room still, but I was on the floor instead of the bed, and my clothes were absolutely soaking wet, and I tasted salt and blood. I changed clothes. I walked out of the captain's quarters to see Luke on deck talking to Jill in the midst of the horrible storm. They suddenly quit talking when they saw me. I found that strange. I don't like being the odd man out, Luke yelled. Where have you been? The men turned the whole ship inside out after we heard screaming in your room. I told him I wasn't sure. He held up an empty bottle of rum, my rum, and told me Jill found it in my room. Traitor. I couldn't believe Jill sold me out to my own brother. I didn't think Gil would ever do something like that. Luke sent me to his quarters and yelled at me like I was a child. At that point, any good feelings I had for him vanished. He said I was bringing shame on him, and that if I'm drinking so much I don't know where I've been or what's going on, I'm a liability, and that he would leave me at the next island we ran into if I drank a drop the rest of the voyage. He then sentenced me to cleaning up after all the other men for a week. I told him I wasn't drunk, but he wasn't having it. He sent me to my quarters, where I sat and stewed. I hated Luke, and now I hated Jill. I hated Thier's secrets. I hated whatever was happening at 2:13. I hated the sound, the happenings, the men, the ship, and the world. I also thought that level of betrayal by Jill seemed very strange, and unlike him, he seemed different now. Not just the limp and the stutter being gone, something else. He didn't seem like himself anymore, and him having Luke's ear seemed like a recipe for even more danger than we were already in. I decided I was going to use my time as a slave over the next week to watch Jill and also to figure out how to punish Luke for making a fool of me. They will both pay. August 7th, 1888. This storm is only getting worse, and I fear it shall never end. The noise woke me again last night, and it was so loud last night, I broke 3 teeth clenching them in pain. I cover my ears, but it doesn't help. This sounds crazy, but it seems like the sound is not going into our ears, but maybe just in our mind, because I've been asking the men when they hear it, and some haven't heard it in over a week. Strange. I wish I had that luxury, but it seems as though I am taking the brunt of it. I had to wake up 2 hours early for my extra chores. My first chore was to feed Bones, so I put a cloth over my face to breathe through. Luke has been keeping everyone out of the sickbay so they don't catch yellow fever. This is absolutely not yellow fever. Luke is a liar. Bones is a very suitable nickname for him right now. He looks like a skeleton wearing a skin suit. It is horrible. It behooves me how someone that looks like he does is still alive. He has gone completely blind. He is so thin you can see the indentation of his teeth through his lips. He can no longer talk. He is completely incontinent, and the yellow veins have overtaken his entire body. The skin above the veins has become completely transparent. Now I can see that the veins themselves are not yellow. They are clear. His blood is yellow. I see the thick pus like blood squelch through his veins with every heartbeat. He coughs violently, and horrible pieces of his lungs are spit up onto the floor. His muscles have also completely disintegrated to the point his mouth just dangles open because he has to strength to close it. He can't eat anymore. I'm just stuffing food down his throat with my finger to keep him alive. He would make a horrible sound as he choked down the food. He threw up once while I fed him, and I saw these little creatures swimming in the vomit. The devil himself couldn't devise a worse fate. I do not want to believe it, but something unnatural is happening out here, and maybe what Bones and Gil said they saw has more validity to it than I first surmised. After seeing Bones in that state, I marched straight over to Luke's room and screamed, "You know good and well that Bones doesn't have yellow fever, Luke. You know that, and you are deliberately lying to the crew." Luke just looked at me pensively, then responded, "What would you have me do, Tom? I don't know what happened to him that night. I don't know what's wrong with him now. I can't cure. He's not getting better. He's begging for death." He's using up all the opium we have for the entire voyage, and if I tell the crew, they will become so scared that I don't even know what would happen. I'm the captain, and my chief role is to think of everyone, not just one person." I then retorted, "You must tell the crew. They have a right to know." Then Luke said, "The only thing that would do is make my men scared and possibly put everyone in danger. I don't want this at all, but I've been thinking the best thing we can do is put Bones out of his misery and say the fever took him. Bones himself asks for death multiple times a day." Then I replied, "No, Luke, it is evil to lie to us, and even more evil to kill a man. I will give you the night to decide, but if you do not tell the men the truth by morning, I will," and I walked out. I couldn't believe the wonderful Captain Luke, everyone's hero, wanted to murder a man in cold blood. I left Luke to decide how he wanted to handle this situation, but in the meantime, I decided to focus on Gil as well today. He seems completely different from the man I knew before the encounter. He seems more confident. The before Gil was a follower. Even as a first mate, he was a people pleaser. He followed from the front in a way, but now all that has changed. He's sharp, quick, and don't seem to value others' opinion anymore. I will keep watching. I need something real on Gil, enough that I can actually explain it in a clear way without sounding crazy. He's off, I know it. I must find out what is happening. I will. It's up to me. I am the only one that can figure this out. I hear the stories and see the effects of whatever is happening, but I have to see for myself, so I can know without a shadow of a doubt. It won't stop raining, and I can't go into the crow's nest till this horrible squall is over. I can't believe Luke hasn't been out there trying to find the answer. He doesn't care about anyone but himself. He has failed all of us. I wish I were captain. I could do a much better job, but no. Here I am scrubbing latrines, serving the living dead, and being humiliated, while he sits in his well-furnished captain's quarters, driving us deeper and deeper into Hades itself. I will save us, and I will show this crew what a real man of honor looks like. I just must come up with my plan. August 7th, 1888. I woke up early and prepared myself to walk to Luke's room and see what he had decided to do about Bones. As I made my way, I heard the captain on deck shouting in a very loud, upset tone. He said, "Last night very late the fever took Mr. Bones. Because of his very serious case of yellow fever, I decided it best dispose of his body as quickly as possible alone to protect the crew's health. We will have his funeral now and use this empty casket filled with his belongings to represent him." I was shocked. I was angry. I was indignant. I wanted to stand up and yell the truth I carried in my heart, but that weasel Luke and thrown my evidence out to sea. I couldn't prove what I knew. I sat full of rage through the fake funeral, boiling over the sides of the ship with fury. After the funeral, I trapper Luke alone. I said, "I cannot believe the lengths you have gone to lie to your crew. You hurried him in secret to hide his true nature from the men. You are vile. You better count your luck stars he died last night, or the crew would know everything." Luke looked down. A tear formed in his right eye. Then it hit me. I choked out, "The sickness didn't kill him, did it?" Luke just looked away from me in shame. "Luke, you killed an innocent man," I said. Luke said painfully, "I don't have the luxury, the pristine morals you expect from me while you drink yourself to death. You left me no choice. The crew would have eaten themselves alive if they knew the truth. You pushed me to this, and Bones begged to die. Also, if he stayed alive, all the medicine for the whole voyage would be used up in a couple more weeks. I am the captain, and I had to make a horrible choice, but I made it. I do the things you can't and won't do. That is why I will be remembered, and you will mop. And now we press on." Then Luke put on his hat, wiped his eyes, and walked away from me. R.I.P. Bones.